I handed Dr. Nadine de Winter a tissue to wipe the frothy spit off her vintage Chanel blazer. She was trembling, bankrupt and technically homeless, screaming that I was a demon in silk. I just smiled and adjusted her collar, careful not to touch her skin. Funny how 3 months ago, she was the queen of Chicago society, and I was just the little wife she and my husband were robbing blind. They really shouldn't have toasted to their victory before the check cleared. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I have this theory that happiness is just efficient logistics. If you can control the variables, you can control the outcome, right? That's what I told myself for 10 years. My name is Zara, and until about 48 hours ago, I was the woman who had the spreadsheet for everything. That morning, the Tuesday before the engagement party, the house smelled like burnt toast and high-stakes anxiety. I was standing at the kitchen island, which is this massive slab of white quartz that usually makes me feel calm, but today it was just a staging ground for war. My tablet was propped up against a fruit bowl, pinging with notifications every 14 seconds. Okay, caterers confirmed for 6:01 p.m., not 6:30, I muttered to myself, tapping the screen with a manicured nail. Florist says the white hydrangeas are looking sad due to the heat, so we need to pivot to orchids. God, orchids are going to cost another $1,000. I took a sip of my coffee. It was black, strong enough to strip paint, and exactly what I needed. My husband's sister, Noelle, was getting engaged to the golden boy of the Chicago medical scene, Ashton de Winter. And because I'm the type of person who physically cannot let things fail, I had somehow become the unofficial wedding planner, therapist, and financial shield for the entire event. The phone rang. It was Noelle. I put her on speaker and went back to aggressive typing. Zara, are you there? Please tell me you're there. Noelle's voice came through, sounding like she was hyperventilating inside a closet. I'm here, sweetie, breathe. Did the shoes not fit? We can return them. No, it's not the shoes. It's her, Noelle whispered. I stopped typing. Dr. de Winter, what did she do now? She sent a gift, a pre-engagement gift. It arrived like 20 minutes ago via private courier. I leaned against the counter, blowing steam off my mug. Okay, and is it a bomb? Is it a passive-aggressive book on etiquette? It's a bag, Zara. A Birkin. A Himalayan Birkin. I nearly choked on my coffee. Hold on. A Himalayan? Noelle, that's a down payment on a house. That's a 6-figure bag. Are you sure it's real? It has the receipt. It has the certificates. It's sitting on my bed looking like it's judging my IKEA duvet cover. Noelle sounded like she was crying. I can't accept this. I can't. It's too much pressure. Why would she send this? It feels like she's buying me. She is buying you, I said, trying to keep my voice even, or at least she's buying the right to control the aesthetic. Look, Noelle, listen to me. I'm listening, she sniffled. Dr. Nadine de Winter deals in power. That's her currency. She doesn't give gifts. She makes investments. If you return it, you insult her. If you keep it, you owe her. It's a classic power play. So what do? I'm terrified to even touch it. What if I scratch it? I'll be in debt for the rest of my life. I sighed, rubbing my temples. You put it on a high shelf in its dust bag. You write a very polite, very sterile thank you note on that nice stationery I bought you. You say, thank you for the incredibly generous gesture. I am overwhelmed. You do not gush. You do not apologize. You act like you receive 6-figure handbags every Tuesday. Do you understand? Act like I'm rich. Okay, I can try, Noelle stammered. But Zara, she scares me. Ashton is great. He's perfect, but his mother... She looks at me like I'm a smudge on her glasses. You are not a smudge, I said firmly. You are a catch. You're smart, you're kind, and you have great hair. Nadine is just... She's a lot. She's theater. Just think of her as a character in a movie we're watching. Don't let her into your head. You're so good at this, Noelle said, her breathing finally slowing down. I don't know what I'd do without you. Honestly, I think Kendrick would have lost his mind years ago if you didn't manage the family." "Kendrick is fine," I said, though a tiny prickle of irritation spiked in my chest. "Speaking of your brother, he's currently late for breakfast and I need to brief him on the seating chart." "Okay, I'll go write the note. Thank you, Zara. Seriously." "Anytime. Bye." I hung up and stared at the dark screen of my tablet. A Himalayan Birkin. Dr. Nadine De Winter was a widow who ran a high-end cosmetic dermatology empire. She was wealthy, yes, but that kind of spending. That was aggressive even for her. It felt desperate or arrogant. I couldn't tell which. I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs, the rhythmic, confident tread of my husband, Kendrick. Kendrick walked into the kitchen looking like he'd just stepped out of a GQ photo shoot for most eligible venture capitalists. He was wearing that navy blue bespoke suit I'd bought him for his birthday, the one with the subtle pinstripe that you only notice if you're standing in his personal space. His cuffs were crisp, his tie was a perfect Windsor knot, and the smell of him hit me before he even reached the island. Oud wood and something sharper, citrusy. He didn't look at me immediately. He went straight for the espresso machine, his back stiff. "Morning, babe," he said. His voice was a half octave higher than his usual morning grumble. "Coffee ready?" "In the pot," I said, watching him. "You look sharp. Big day?" He turned around, holding a mug that said "World's Okayest Golfer," a gag gift from Noel. He flashed me that 1,000-watt smile, the one that used to make my knees weak but lately just felt like a high-beam headlight blinding me from seeing the road. "Huge day," he said, taking a sip and grimacing. "Too hot. Yeah, huge day. I've got that follow-up with the Singapore group." "The Singapore group?" I leaned my elbows on the counter, steepling my fingers. "I thought you said they passed last week? Something about the market volatility in tech?" Kendrick blinked. It was a micro-flinch, barely a millisecond, but I saw it. He set the mug down a little too hard. No, that was the Hong Kong group. This is a new syndicate, angel investors. Very private, very liquid. They're looking to dump significant capital into the subsidiary before the quarter ends." "That's fast," I said. "Due diligence usually takes months. You met them when? 2 weeks ago." "They move fast, Zara. That's how the Asian markets work right now. You gotta strike while the iron is hot." He checked his watch, a Rolex Submariner that I knew for a fact needed servicing. "Actually, I might be late tonight. Dinner meeting with their lead rep, just to finalize the term sheets." "Another dinner?" I asked, keeping my tone light, breezy. "That's 3 this week, Ken. You're going to burn out. Plus, we have the rehearsal dinner for Noel tomorrow. You can't be exhausted for that." "I won't be," he snapped. Then he softened, realizing his tone was off. He walked over and kissed me on the forehead. His lips felt dry. "I'm doing this for us, babe. For the family. If this deal closes, the commission alone. I mean, we're talking early retirement money. We could finally buy that place in Turks and Caicos." "I like our life here," I said quietly. "Yeah, but more is better, right?" He laughed, but it was a hollow sound like air escaping a tire. He grabbed a slice of toast I'd buttered, took 1 bite, and tossed the rest in the trash. "Gotta run. Love you." "Love you too," I said to his retreating back. I watched him grab his keys and his leather portfolio. He stopped at the hall mirror, adjusted his tie, and checked his teeth. Then he pulled out his phone. He didn't just check it. He hunched over it, his body angling away from the room, shielding the screen. His thumbs moved in a blur. A smile touched his lips. Not the fake headlight smile, but a real one. A secret one. Then he was out the door. The silence rushed back into the kitchen, heavy and suffocating. Singapore Group. I ran a management consulting firm. I knew the markets. Singapore was cautious right now. Nobody was dumping significant liquid capital into a mid-level logistics subsidiary without a forensic audit. It didn't add up. And the cologne. Kendrick usually applied 2 sprays. Today he smelled like he'd marinated in it. "You're paranoid, Zara." I said out loud to the empty room. "You're stressed about the wedding. Stop looking for ghosts." I forced myself to look back at my list. Item 4. Pick up gowns from Neiman Marcus. Item 5. Confirm seating chart. "Just focus on the dress," I whispered. "The dress is controllable. The dress doesn't lie to you about Singapore." By 3 p.m., I had put out 4 fires at my actual job, fired a lazy intern, and rewritten a proposal for a client in Denver. My brain felt like it had been run through a cheese grater. I needed to get out of the office. I told my assistant, mild-mannered Gary, that I was leaving early for wedding logistics. "Good luck, boss," Gary said, not looking up from his keyboard. "Don't kill any florists." "No promises," I called back. The drive to Tyson's Galleria was a nightmare. D.C. Traffic is a special kind of purgatory where time ceases to have meaning. I sat in my Mercedes on the Beltway, surrounded by brake lights, listening to a true crime podcast about a woman who dissolved her husband in a bathtub. It felt oddly soothing. When I finally pulled into the parking garage at the Galleria, the air changed. This wasn't a mall. It was a temple of capitalism. The floors were polished Italian marble that reflected the recessed lighting, like a frozen lake. The air smelled of expensive leather, vanilla, and the distinct crisp scent of money. I took the elevator up to the second floor, my heels clicking a sharp rhythm on the stone. I loved this place. It was orderly. Everything here was beautiful, curated, and perfect. If something was flawed here, they marked it down or threw it away. I walked into the designer boutique where I'd ordered the dresses. The sales associate, a woman named Chloe who wore all black and had eyebrows that looked like architectural diagrams, lit up when she saw me. "Mrs. Adabio, you're here. We were just steaming the gowns." "Hi, Chloe. Please tell me the shoulder seam on Noelle's dress was fixed. If there's even a single pucker, she's going to have a meltdown, and then I'm going to have a meltdown." Chloe laughed, a tinkling practice sound. "It is flawless. Our tailor stayed late last night. He practically performed microsurgery on that silk." She led me to the back, to the private fitting area. The gowns were hanging in black, breathless garment bags. Chloe unzipped the first one, Noelle's dress. It was a shimmering silver column of sequins and silk, understated but heavy. I inspected the shoulder. I ran my thumb over the seam. Smooth as glass. "Perfect," I breathed. "And yours?" Chloe unzipped the second bag. My dress was champagne gold, structured, severe, and elegant. "It's going to look stunning on you." "Pack them up," I said, handing over my credit card. "I want them in the thick travel bags, not the flimsy plastic ones. I don't want them wrinkling in the car." "Of course. Would you like a water? Champagne?" "No, I'm good. Just eager to get these home." While Chloe processed the transaction, I wandered around the shop touching fabrics. Cashmere, vicuña, silk. It was grounding. I checked my watch. 4:15 p.m. Kendrick wouldn't be home until at least 9:12 p.m. if his dinner meeting was real. I felt a sudden wave of exhaustion. The adrenaline of the workday was fading, leaving behind the caffeine crash from this morning. "Here you go, Mrs. Adabio." Chloe handed me the heavy bags and my receipt. "Have a wonderful time at the engagement." "Thanks, Chloe." I hoisted the bags, one over each shoulder, and walked out. I needed caffeine. There was a coffee bar on the first floor near the atrium that made a macchiato that didn't taste like burnt rubber. I decided to treat myself. I headed toward the escalator, descending slowly. The mall was relatively quiet for a Tuesday afternoon, mostly tourists and ladies who lunched. I reached the ground floor and navigated through the cosmetics department, dodging spritz-happy perfume salesmen. To get to the coffee bar, I had to cut through the central atrium. On the left side of the atrium was the Vault, an exclusive semi-private lounge for the mall's VIP members and black card holders. I'd been in there a few times. It was nice. Free hors d'oeuvres, plush velvet furniture, very low lighting. The walls weren't solid. They were these artistic frosted glass panels with gold framing, separated by large marble pillars. You couldn't see details from the outside, but you could see shapes, silhouettes, movement. I was walking past it, shifting the heavy garment bags on my shoulder, thinking about whether I should order sushi for dinner since I'd be eating alone. That's when I saw him. It wasn't even a conscious recognition at first. It was primal. I saw a gap between two of the frosted panels, a clear line of sight into the back corner of the lounge. There was a man standing there. He wasn't sitting. He was standing behind a high-backed burgundy velvet armchair. The posture. That was what stopped me. Shoulders broad, suit jacket tailored perfectly to the waist, head tilted slightly to the left. I stopped walking. A woman with a stroller nearly rammed into my ankles. "Excuse you," she huffed, swerving around me. I ignored her. I stared at the gap. That looks like Kendrick. My brain immediately offered a logical correction. Don't be stupid. Kendrick is in a meeting with Singaporean investors in downtown D.C. 20 miles away. That is just another man in a blue suit. But then the man turned slightly. I saw the watch, the Rolex Submariner, the way the light hit the bezel. My stomach dropped. It felt like I'd missed a step on a staircase. The air in the mall suddenly felt thin, cold. Okay, I thought. Okay, so he's here. Maybe the meeting is here. Maybe the investors wanted to meet at the vault. It's a prestigious spot. He's networking. I took a step closer, moving toward a large marble pillar that would hide me from view while letting me peek through the gap. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in a bad movie. I was clutching $2,000 worth of evening wear, hiding behind a pillar in a department store. Just say hi, I told myself. Walk in there, say hello, meet the investors, be the supportive wife. I shifted my weight, peeking around the cold stone. The man, Kendrick, wasn't talking to a group of Asian businessmen. He was alone with someone sitting in the chair, a woman. I could only see the back of her head. Her hair was styled in an intricate, expensive updo. Blonde, highlighted, stiff with hairspray. Kendrick wasn't presenting a pitch deck. He was leaning down. He placed his hands on the woman's shoulders. I blinked. My brain refused to process the data. Why is he massaging an investor? Is she choking? Then he leaned closer. He buried his face in the woman's neck. He inhaled. I saw his shoulders relax, saw the tension leave his body in a way it never did when he was with me. The woman reached up. Her hand, adorned with a massive, glittering ring, caressed his cheek. She wasn't pushing him away. She was pulling him closer. I swear to God the world went silent. The jazz music, the chatter of shoppers, the click of heels, it all just muted. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. A whoosh, 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 like a heartbeat underwater. The woman turned her head to say something to him. She laughed. It was a laugh I knew. It was a laugh I had heard on speakerphone this morning. It was a laugh I had heard at 3 consecutive Christmases. It was a laugh that sounded like expensive crystal breaking. Nadine. Dr. Nadine de Winter. My husband was making out with my sister-in-law's future mother-in-law. The absurdity of it hit me before the pain. It was mathematically impossible. Nadine? She was 55. She was a widow. She was the mother of the boy Noelle was marrying in 4 days. She was the woman who had just sent a Himalayan Birkin as a power move. Kendrick leaned down further and kissed her. Not a peck, a deep, lingering, open-mouthed kiss. He had one hand on her shoulder, and the other one was sliding down the front of her blazer. I felt bile rise in my throat. I physically gagged, clamping a hand over my mouth. No, 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 no. This wasn't an affair. This was incestuous. This was nuclear. This was blowing up 2 families with 1 stick of dynamite. I looked at Kendrick's face as he pulled back. He looked adoring. He looked at this older, terrifying socialite with a look of pure, puppy dog devotion that I hadn't seen directed at me in 5 years. "You're a genius," I heard him say. His voice carried through the gap because the lounge was quiet. "God, you're brilliant, Nadine." "I know, darling," she purred. Her voice was unmistakable. "But keep your voice down. We have to be careful until the wire transfer clears." Wire transfer? My brain, which had been frozen in emotional shock, suddenly rebooted. The CEO Zara part of my brain, the part that managed crises, analyzed data, and destroyed inefficiencies, woke up. They aren't just sleeping together, I realized. They are talking about money. The Singaporean investor. The jagged pieces of the puzzle slammed together so hard it almost knocked the wind out of me. There was no investor. There was just Nadine. And if there was a wire transfer involved, and Kendrick was lying about it, the nausea vanished. It was replaced by something cold, something sharp. It felt like I had swallowed an ice cube whole. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to storm in there and throw a garment bag at them. That's what a victim does. That's what a little wife does. I wasn't a victim. I was a witness, and witnesses need evidence. My hands were shaking. Not a little tremble, but a violent, rattling shake. I set the garment bags down on the floor behind the pillar, moving slowly so the plastic wouldn't rustle. I reached into my purse. I had to dig past my wallet, my keys, my lip gloss. My fingers brushed against my phone. I gripped it like a weapon. Breathe, Zara. Focus. Macro lens. Low light setting. I pulled the phone out. I unlocked it. My thumb hovered over the camera icon. I took a deep breath, held it, and leaned out from behind the pillar. They were still at it. Nadine had turned in the chair, so she was facing him more fully. She was holding his tie, twisting it around her finger, a tie I had tied for him this morning. Click. I took the first photo. It was a bit blurry. Kendrick's back was mostly in the way. "Come on, turn your head, look at her." As if obeying a silent command, Kendrick shifted. He laughed at something she said and leaned his forehead against hers. Click, click, click. Perfect high definition. I got his profile. I got her face, eyes closed, smiling that predatory smile. I got his hand on her waist. "So, is the account ready?" Kendrick asked. I switched to video mode. Record. "It's all set up," Nadine said. I zoomed in. The audio was faint but audible. "Ashton suspects nothing. The boy is too busy coding his little app to look at the ledgers. Once the funds hit the shell company, we wash it through the consulting firm, and it looks like pure venture capital." "And Zara?" Kendrick asked. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hearing my name in his mouth in that context felt like a physical slap. Nadine laughed again. She reached up and patted his cheek. "Oh, please. Zara is a worker bee. She's too busy planning the party and running her little spreadsheets to notice anything. She trusts you, Kendrick. She thinks you're the golden husband." "I feel bad sometimes," Kendrick muttered. "Don't," Nadine commanded. Her voice turned hard. "She's controlling. She treats you like an employee. I treat you like a king. Remember that. Now kiss me." He did. I recorded it all. The kiss, the confession, the disrespect, the mockery. I watched the timer on my screen. 0:45, 0:50, 1 nay. "Enough," I whispered to myself. I stopped the recording. I pulled back behind the pillar. I quickly opened my gallery. I selected the photos and the video. Add to hidden folder. Then, purely out of instinct, I opened my Cloud Drive app and hit upload. I watched the blue bar creep across the screen. 20%, 50%, 80%. Upload complete. I was safe. The evidence was in the cloud. I grabbed the garment bags. They felt heavier now, like they were filled with lead. I didn't look back at the lounge. I didn't look at the coffee bar. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit. I forced myself to walk at a normal pace. Left foot, right foot, keep your head up, don't run. If you run, you look guilty. I walked past the perfume counters, past the smiling sales clerks, past the security guard. As soon as the automatic glass doors slid open and the humid, hot air of the parking garage hit me, I felt the first crack in my armor. A sob ripped out of my throat, sharp and painful. I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. Not here. I told myself. Not in public. Get to the car. I walked to my Mercedes, my heels echoing in the concrete cavern. I unlocked the door, threw the dresses into the back seat, and climbed into the driver's seat. I locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the gray concrete wall in front of me. The silence of the car was deafening. My husband was sleeping with Nadine. They were stealing money. They were laughing at me. Worker bee. I looked at my eyes in the rearview mirror. They were wide, shocked, glassy. But underneath the shock, I saw something else. Something I recognized from my toughest negotiations. Rage. Cold, calculated, burning rage. Worker bee? I whispered to the reflection. I started the engine. The dashboard lit up. Okay, Nadine, I said, putting the car into reverse. Let's see what happens when the worker bee stings. I sat in that parking garage for what felt like a lifetime. The engine of my Mercedes was idling, a low, steady purr that usually comforted me, but now it just sounded like a countdown. The air conditioning was blasting at 68 degrees, but I felt sticky, hot, suffocated. I gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, squeezing until my knuckles turned white, then red, then white again. Worker bee, I said aloud. The words tasted like ash. It wasn't the infidelity that made my hands shake. Infidelity I could handle. Men cheated. It was a statistic. It was a cliché. If Kendrick had slept with a random paralegal or some barista with a nose ring, I would have been hurt. Sure. I would have divorced him, taken half his assets, and moved on. But this? This was specialized cruelty. Nadine de Winter. The woman I had spent months trying to impress. The woman whose approval I had sought like a desperate teenager. The woman who looked at my business, my life's work, and called it cute. She wasn't just sleeping with my husband, she was using him to humiliate me. She treats you like a king. The sentence replayed in my head, looping over and over like a corrupted audio file. I looked at the digital clock on the dashboard. 5:12 p.m. I had been sitting here for 17 minutes. In those 17 minutes, the shock had evaporated. The sadness was gone. What was left was a strange, hyper-lucid clarity. It was the same feeling I got right before a hostile takeover negotiation. The world sharpened. Colors got brighter. Sounds got crisper. I looked at the passenger seat where the two black garment bags were slumped over like body bags. Noelle's engagement dress. My dress. I should burn them, I thought. I should take a lighter to that $3,000 silk right here in the parking lot. But I didn't reach for a lighter. I reached for my phone again. I checked the cloud upload status. 100% complete. Good. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The box breathing technique I used before board meetings. If I went home now and screamed, I lost. If I confronted Kendrick tonight, he would deny it. Or worse, he would beg. He would make it emotional. He would talk about mistakes and weakness. Nadine would spin it. She would say I was crazy, jealous, hysterical. She had social capital that I didn't. She was a De Winter. I was just Zara, the woman who worked too hard. No, I needed more than a video. A video was just sex. I needed leverage. They mentioned a wire transfer, I whispered. They mentioned a shell company. That was the kill shot. I put the car in reverse. The backup camera flickered to life, showing the empty gray concrete behind me. I backed out slowly, methodically. I drove up the spiral ramp, passing other cars, passing happy shoppers loading bags into their trunks. As I merged onto the busy street driving toward the highway, I turned off the podcast. I drove in silence. I needed to think. I needed to plan. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a CEO conducting an internal audit of a failing subsidiary. And Kendrick? He wasn't my husband. He was a liability. The drive home was a blur of autopilot maneuvering, but by the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the manicured lawn. The house looked the same, modern, white brick, imposing. It was the house I had bought, the house my name was on the deed for. I pulled into the garage, parking next to Kendrick's empty spot. I grabbed the garment bags. I walked into the mudroom, kicked off my heels, and carried the dresses straight to the guest room. I couldn't bear to look at them. I threw them onto the bed and shut the door. Then I went straight to my office. My home office was my sanctuary. When we renovated, I had insisted on soundproofing the walls and installing a solid oak door with a heavy-duty deadbolt. Kendrick had laughed at the time. "What are you doing in there, building a bomb?" he'd joked. "Just business," I'd said. I walked in, locked the deadbolt, and sat down at my desk. I woke up my iMac. The screen glowed with the familiar blue of my desktop background. First step, security. I opened a private browsing window. I logged into the cloud account where I'd uploaded the video and photos. I created a new folder titled Project Icarus. I moved the files inside. Then I downloaded an encryption tool and password protected the folder with a generated string of 20 random characters. I memorized the password, 7x9 quam tpsmk orfors. Then I copied the encrypted folder to 3 different locations, a secondary cloud drive under my maiden name, a hidden partition on my hard drive, and finally a physical USB drive that I pulled from my desk drawer. I held the USB drive in my hand. It was tiny, silver, insignificant. It contained the end of my marriage. I put the USB drive inside a hollowed-out highlighter pen I kept in my pencil cup, a little spy gadget Noelle had given me as a joke stocking stuffer years ago. "Joke's on you, Noelle," I muttered. Next, I picked up my phone. I went to the gallery. I selected the video of Kendrick and Nadine. I selected the photos. Delete. "Are you sure you want to delete 5 items?" "Yes." I went to the recently deleted folder. Delete all. This action cannot be undone. Confirm. I scrutinized my phone. Was there anything else? Location history. I went into my Google Maps timeline. It showed a stop at Tyson's Galleria. I left it. It was plausible. I had gone to pick up the dresses. The lie had to be wrapped in truth. I sat back in my Herman Miller chair. The room was silent save for the hum of the computer fan. I looked around at the framed photos on my bookshelf. Me and Kendrick in Maui. Me and Kendrick at the company Christmas party. Me and Kendrick on our wedding day, looking young and stupidly hopeful. I stood up, walked over to the shelf, and took the wedding photo down. I didn't smash it. I didn't throw it. I just opened the back of the frame, took the photo out, and fed it into the shredder by my desk. The machine whirred for 3 seconds. Done. I put the empty frame back on the shelf. It looked like a waiting mouth. I checked the time. 7:45 p.m. Kendrick would be home soon. I needed to shower. I needed to wash the smell of the parking garage sweat off me. I needed to put on fresh clothes. I needed to put on my mask. At 9:15 p.m., the front door opened. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of seafood gumbo I had thawed from the freezer. It was Kendrick's favorite. The smell of thyme and cayenne pepper filled the room, masking the earlier scent of burnt toast. "Zara, I'm home," he called out. "In the kitchen, babe," I yelled back, pitching my voice to be light, welcoming. Kendrick walked in. He looked exhausted. His tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. He was carrying his jacket over his arm, but I saw the details. His hair was slightly messier than it should be after a business dinner. His lips were a little swollen, friction burn from kissing, and the smell. As he leaned in to kiss my cheek, I held my breath, but even holding my breath, I caught it. Beneath the oud wood cologne, beneath the stale restaurant air, was the faint cloying scent of Chanel No. 5 and gin. Nadine drank gin martinis. I forced myself not to recoil. I let his lips touch my skin. It felt like being branded. "Hey," I said, turning back to the stove immediately. "How was the meeting? You look beat." "Brutal," he sighed, tossing his jacket onto a bar stool. He walked to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of sparkling water. They really drilled me on the projections for Q3. These Singaporean guys, they don't mess around, but I think I got them there. I think we're close to signing. That's amazing, Ken, I said, ladling gumbo into a bowl. You must be starving. Did you eat? We ordered appetizers, but I was doing most of the talking. I'm famished. He sat down at the island. I placed the bowl in front of him. I put a spoon on a napkin next to it. I watched him. He ate hungrily. He didn't look like a man who was racked with guilt. He didn't look like a man who had just betrayed his wife with her future in-law. He looked like a man who felt entitled to this hot meal. So, he said between bites, did you get the dresses? I did, I said, leaning against the counter, crossing my arms. They're in the guest room. Noelle's is perfect. Yours is... Well, I hope you like champagne gold. I love whatever you wear, he said automatically. He didn't look up from the bowl. Did you see anyone at the mall? I heard traffic was a nightmare. My heart skipped a beat. Was he testing me? Did he see me? Just the usual crowd, I said, keeping my face perfectly still. I ran in, grabbed the bags, and ran out. I had a headache. Poor baby, he said. He reached out and squeezed my hand, the hand resting on the counter. His palm was warm. I looked at his hand covering mine. This was the hand that had been on Nadine's waist. This was the hand that had been down her blazer. It's gone now, I said, gently pulling my hand away under the pretense of brushing hair out of my face. The gumbo helped. This is really good, he said, scraping the bottom of the bowl. You're the best, Z. I don't know how you do it all. The business, the house, dealing with Noelle's drama. It's all about logistics, I said coldly. He paused, sensing the shift in my tone. He looked up. You okay? You seem... tight. Just tired, I lied. Like you said, big week. We have the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Are you ready to face the De Winters? He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He just smiled that easy, charming smile. As ready as I'll ever be. Nadine is a handful, but Ashton's a good kid. It'll be fine. Nadine is a handful, I repeated. That's one way to put it. She's just protective, Kendrick shrugged. Mothers and their sons, right? Right, I said. Mothers and sons. I watched him stand up and put his bowl in the sink. He stretched, his shirt lifting slightly to reveal his stomach. I'm gonna hit the shower, he said. Wash the day off. Good idea, I said. Scrub hard. He laughed, thinking I was joking. He walked out of the kitchen. As soon as he was gone, I grabbed the bowl he had used. I stared at it. I wanted to smash it against the floor. Instead, I rinsed it, placed it in the dishwasher, and closed the door with a soft click. Clean, I whispered. Everything has to be clean. I lay in bed next to him, staring at the ceiling. The room was pitch black, save for the faint green glow of the alarm clock. 3:14 a.m. Kendrick was asleep. He was a heavy sleeper. He snored softly, a rhythmic, oblivious sound that used to comfort me. Now, it sounded like the noise of a parasite, happy and fed. I hadn't slept a wink. My mind was a browser with 50 tabs open, and they were all frozen. The wire transfer, the shell company, the Singapore group. I couldn't do this alone. I was good with numbers, but I was a management consultant, not a forensic auditor. I needed someone who could dig deeper than Google. I needed someone who could see through walls. I slowly, carefully peeled back the duvet. I slid out of bed, my feet touching the cold hardwood floor. I held my breath, watching Kendrick. He shifted, muttered something in his sleep, and settled back down. I tiptoed out of the room, closing the door until it latched silently. I went back to my office. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I just used the small desk lamp, angling it down. I opened a drawer and pulled out a burner phone I kept for client emergencies. Sometimes you needed to make calls that couldn't be traced back to the firm during sensitive mergers. I powered it on. I downloaded Signal. I searched for a contact I hadn't used in 3 years. Harlan. Harlan wasn't exactly a private investigator. He was a fixer. He was a former forensic accountant for the IRS who had realized the private sector paid better and asked fewer questions. I had used him once to vet a potential partner who turned out to be running a Ponzi scheme. Harlan had saved me $2 million that day. I typed a message. To Harlan, from Z subject, urgent audit. Need a stage 5 deep dive. Target Kendrick Adabio, husband, and Dr. Nadine DeWinter, associate. Suspect embezzlement via shell companies. Need financial trace and physical surveillance immediately. Money is no object. This is personal. I hit send. I watched the little check mark appear, then the double check mark. 3 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Harlan, stage 5 is nuclear. You sure you want to open that door, Z? Once I look, I can't unsee. Me, burn it down, Harlan. I want every receipt. I want every text message. I want to know what they ate for lunch and who paid for it. Harlan, copy. I need 24 hours for financials. I can have a tail on them by sunrise. Meet me Thursday, 10 a.m., the usual spot. Me, done. I deleted the chat thread. I turned off the phone. I put it back in the drawer underneath a stack of printer paper. I sat there in the dim light, shivering slightly. I had just sicked a bloodhound on my own husband. There was no going back now. Divorce was one thing. This was war. I went back to the bedroom. I slipped back under the covers. Kendrick rolled over and draped a heavy arm across my waist. Love you, he mumbled in his sleep. I lay there, feeling the weight of his arm like a chain. I know, I whispered into the darkness. That's why this is going to be so easy. Thursday morning broke with a gray, miserable drizzle. It was fitting. I told my assistant Gary I had a dentist appointment. Root canal, I said. Might take all morning. Ouch, Gary said. Good luck. I drove to the usual spot. It wasn't a dark alley, it was a dog park in Rock Creek Park. Harlan had a golden retriever named Buster, who was his best cover. Nobody suspects the guy throwing a frisbee is actually downloading your bank statements. I parked and walked toward the bench where a man in a beige trench coat and a newsboy cap was sitting. He looked like a kindly grandfather. He was actually the most dangerous man I knew. I sat down next to him. I didn't look at him. I watched Buster chasing a tennis ball in the mud. Cute dog, I said. He's an idiot, Harlan said affectionately, but he's loyal. He placed a thick manila envelope on the bench between us. He didn't hand it to me. He just set it down. You were right, Harlan said. His voice was gravelly, low, about everything, and then some. Tell me, I said, staring at the envelope. Physical surveillance first, Harlan said. They aren't just meeting at the vault, they have a spot. The Ritz-Carlton in Georgetown, room 412. It's rented under a corporate account. Apex Logistics. Apex Logistics is a vendor my company uses for shipping, I said. My blood ran cold. Not anymore, Harlan said. It's a dummy account. Kendrick authorized it 3 months ago. He's been charging the room to your company as executive storage fees. They meet there twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually lunch, sometimes overnight when you're out of town. Lunch? I scoffed. Classy. There's more, Harlan said. I pulled the hotel logs, room service, champagne, massages, all charged to the company card. But that's peanuts compared to the other thing. He tapped the envelope. The Singapore investor? I asked. There is no Singapore investor, Harlan said. There is, however, a company called Vantage Capital Pte. Registered in Singapore. It was incorporated 6 months ago. Who owns it? On paper? A nominee director, a local nobody, but I followed the money trail backwards. The funding for Vantage Capital didn't come from Asian markets. It came from D.C. I felt sick. From where? From Adabio Consulting Group, subsidiary B, Harlan said. Your subsidiary. Kendrick has been approving false invoices for strategic market research from a shell firm in Delaware. That firm wires the money to Vantage in Singapore. Vantage then wires the money back to the U.S. To where? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. To a startup called Ascend Tech. I closed my eyes. Ascend Tech. Ashton's company, I whispered. My nephew-in-law's app. Bingo, Harlan said. They're washing your money to fund the kid's business. It looks like legitimate venture capital on Ashton's end, but the source is your corporate treasury. How much? I asked. Harlan whistled. You better open the envelope, Z. I grabbed the envelope. I shoved it into my purse. Thank you, Harlan. Z, Harlan said, stopping me as I stood up. This is grand larceny. This is federal wire fraud. If you drop this, Kendrick goes to prison for 10 years. Minimum. I looked down at him. And Nadine? She's smart. Her name isn't on the docs, but if you catch her on conspiracy, she goes down too. Good, I said. That's cold, Harlan smiled. I like it. I turned and walked back to my car. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking my hair, but I didn't care. I didn't go back to the office. I went to a quiet coffee shop in Bethesda, one where nobody knew me. I ordered a black tea, found a table in the back corner, and opened the envelope. The first page was a summary, a flow chart. Adabio Consulting, my company. $3.2 million. Shell Corp, Delaware. Vantage Capital, Singapore. Ascend Tech, Ashton. $3.2 million. I stared at the number. The zeros swam before my eyes. $200,000. That was the expansion capital I had been saving for 5 years. That was the money for the new division. That was the employee bonus pool. Kendrick hadn't just dipped his hand in the cookie jar. He had smashed the jar and set the kitchen on fire. I flipped through the pages. Copies of invoices. Invoice number 4092, Asian Market Penetration Strategy, $450,000. Signed, Kendrick Adabio. Invoice 4105, Regulatory Compliance Consulting, $620,000. Signed, Kendrick Adabio. He was sloppy. He was arrogant. He thought I never checked subsidiary B because it was his domain. He thought he was smarter than me. And Nadine. I found a transcript of an intercepted email from Nadine to Kendrick. Harlan really was good. From ndprivateagmail.com to kadabioagmail.com. Subject, the boy needs more. Kendrick, darling. Ashton is saying the burn rate for the new developers is higher than expected. We need another $500K by Friday. Make it happen. Use the logistics code again. Zara won't notice. She never looks at the line items for shipping. Love you. N. Zara won't notice. I traced the words with my finger. They were funding Ashton's dream with my nightmare. Ashton, the sweet, naive boy who thought he was the next Mark Zuckerberg. He probably thought Vantage Capital was real. He probably thought his mother was a genius networker who found him a unicorn investor. He didn't know he was building his castle on a sinkhole. I took a sip of my tea. It was cold. This changed everything. Before, I wanted to hurt them. I wanted to embarrass them. Now I wanted to erase them. I looked at the flowchart again. Ashton was the weak link. Ashton was the recipient. If Ashton knew his investor was actually his fiancé's brother stealing from his fiancé's sister-in-law, the logic bomb. I started to smile. It wasn't a nice smile. I pulled out a notepad from my purse. I started writing a list. 1. Move assets to holding company tomorrow. 2. Bait Nadine at dinner tomorrow night. 3. Prepare the package for Ashton. You want another $500K, Nadine? I whispered to the empty coffee shop. I'll give you something better. I'll give you the truth. I closed the folder. The weight of the $3.2 million theft sat heavy in my bag, but strangely, I felt lighter. I had the gun. I had the bullets. Now I just had to wait for everyone to gather in the same room so I wouldn't miss. The next morning, I was standing in front of the polished mahogany doors of Private Wealth Management at Sterling & Co. Before they had even flipped the sign to open, I checked my reflection in the brass plaque. I looked severe. I was wearing my hostile takeover suit, a sharp charcoal Armani number with a silk blouse that cost more than my first car. My hair was pulled back so tight it acted as a facelift. I needed to look like I owned the building. At 9 a.m. sharp, the doors unlocked. Mrs. Adabio, greeted Elias Sterling, my personal wealth manager. He was a man of 60 with silver hair and a suit that whispered old money. This is a surprise. Usually we schedule quarterly reviews weeks in advance. This isn't a review, Elias, I said, walking past him into his office without waiting for an invitation. This is a restructuring, and I need it done today, before noon. Elias blinked, then quickly followed me, closing the door. Is everything all right? The markets are a bit volatile, but your portfolio is... The markets are fine, I said, sitting down and placing my crocodile skin bag on his desk. My marriage, however, is about to undergo a correction. Elias froze. He was a professional. He knew better than to ask for details. He simply nodded and sat down at his computer. I see. What are your instructions? I want to move all liquid assets, I said, my voice steady. Everything currently in the joint accounts, savings, checking, money market funds. Move it all. Move it where, Mrs. Adabio? To the holding company account, I said. Z Alpha Holdings. The one I established 5 years ago before the wedding. The one where I am the sole signatory and 100% beneficial owner. Elias typed rapidly. That's substantial. We're talking about the operating capital for the household as well? Leave $5,000 in the joint checking for utilities and groceries, I said. Transfer the rest. I also want to liquidate the joint stock portfolio, sell the tech stocks, sell the index funds, move the cash to Z Alpha. Mrs. Adabio, selling right now triggers a significant capital gains tax event, Elias warned, peering over his spectacles. You'll lose almost 15% to the IRS. I'd rather give it to the IRS than let half of it walk out the door with my husband, I said coldly. Do it. Understood. Click, clack, click. And what about the subsidiary accounts, the ones Mr. Adabio manages? I leaned forward. Do not freeze them. Keep them active. Elias looked confused. If you're separating, I need them active, I said, lowering my voice. But I want a mirroring protocol. Every transaction, every wire, every withdrawal over $1. I want an instant alert sent to my personal encrypted email, and I want the daily ledger sent to me at 5 p.m. every day. That is unorthodox, Elias said slowly. Is it illegal? No. You are the majority owner of the parent company. You have the right to audit your subsidiaries. Then do it, I commanded. And Elias, if Kendrick calls, if he asks why the joint account is suddenly light, technical glitch? Elias suggested, a small conspiratorial smile touching his lips. System migration? These things take 48 hours to resolve. I smiled back. It was the first real smile I'd had in days. You're worth every penny of your fee, Elias. I'll have the paperwork ready for signature in 10 minutes, he said. I sat back in the leather chair, watching the D.C. skyline through the window. I had just stripped Kendrick of his safety net. When he tried to pay for his next hotel room with Nadine or his next gin martini, the card wouldn't decline. Yet. But the big money? The money he thought was our money? Gone. It was now safe in a fortress he couldn't touch. The restaurant, Le Cavalier, was the kind of place that didn't put prices on the menu. It was dim, smelling of truffles and old money. Kendrick and I arrived 10 minutes late. My doing. I wanted them to wait. I wanted them to simmer. Sorry, traffic, Kendrick muttered as the maitre d' led us to the private booth in the back. Nadine and Ashton were already seated. Nadine looked expensive. There was no other word for it. She was wearing a blood-red Valentino dress that dipped low enough to show off a diamond necklace that probably cost more than my entire college education. Her hair was swept up in that intricate, stiff blonde helmet I had seen from the back in the department store. She stood up as we approached, opening her arms. "Zara! Kendrick! Finally!" she cooed. Her voice was like velvet wrapped around a razor blade. She smelled of that same cloying perfume, Chanel No. 5, that I had smelled on my husband's collar 2 nights ago. "Nadine," I said, stepping into her embrace. I let her kiss the air next to my cheek. Her skin felt dry, powdery. "You look stunning. Red is such a bold choice." "One must be bold to survive, darling," she whispered, pulling back to look me up and down. Her eyes scanned my outfit, a simple black sheath dress, "and you look sensible, as always." "Comfort is key," I said with a tight smile. I turned to Ashton. The boy looked tired. He was 26 with messy brown hair and the nervous energy of a founder whose startup was burning cash too fast. He stood up to shake my hand. "Hey, Aunt Zara." "Uncle Ken." "Hey, kid," Kendrick said, slapping him on the back a little too hard. "How's the tech world treating you?" "It's intense," Ashton admitted, sitting back down. He fiddled with his napkin. "We're in crunch time for the launch." "Sit, sit," Nadine commanded, waving a hand at the waiter. "Champagne, a bottle of the Krug 08. We're celebrating." I sat down next to Kendrick, directly across from Nadine. Ashton was to her left. "Celebrating what?" I asked, unfolding my napkin. "Family," Nadine said, beaming. She reached out and placed her hand over Kendrick's on the table. It was a gesture that could be interpreted as friendly, familial warmth. But I knew better. I saw the way her index finger stroked his knuckle. The union of our families, Noelle and Ashton. It's just perfect. "It really is," Kendrick said, his voice a little tight. He gently withdrew his hand to pick up his water glass. "Ashton's a lucky guy." "I am," Ashton said earnestly. "Noelle is amazing." "She is," I agreed. "She's very excited about the engagement party. And the gift, Nadine. The Birkin. She called me in a panic." Nadine laughed, throwing her head back. "Oh, that little thing. She needs to get used to the finer things if she's going to be a De Winter. I told her, darling, this is just a starter bag." "A starter bag," I repeated flatly. "Generous." "Well, money is meant to be used, isn't it?" Nadine said, locking eyes with me. "It's energy. It has to flow. If you hoard it, it stagnates. Like water." "Or like a swamp," I added. The waiter arrived with the champagne. Pop. Fizz. Pour. "To the happy couple," Nadine toasted, raising her glass. "To the happy couple," Kendrick echoed. "To truth," I said, clinking my glass against Nadine's. She paused, her glass hovering near her lips. "To truth?" "Yes," I smiled sweetly. "The truth of love. Isn't that what matters?" "Of course." She took a sip, her eyes narrowing slightly over the rim. She sensed something. A shift in the wind, but she couldn't place it. She thought I was just the worker bee making awkward conversation. She had no idea I was the exterminator. The appetizers arrived. Tuna tartare for the table. "So, Ashton," I said, spearing a piece of tuna, "Kendrick tells me you secured a new investor recently, some big international firm." Ashton lit up. It was the first time he looked alive all night. "Yeah, it's incredible, actually. Vantage Capital. They're based in Singapore. They came out of nowhere." "Singapore," I said, nodding thoughtfully. "That's a sophisticated market. How did you find them? Or did they find you?" "Mom actually helped," Ashton said, looking at Nadine with pure adoration. "She has these insane connections. She made a few calls, and suddenly I had a term sheet in my inbox." "Is that so?" I turned my gaze to Nadine. She was busy dissecting her tartare, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't know you had contacts in Asian fintech, Nadine. I thought your expertise was dermatology." Nadine dabbed her mouth with a napkin. "Oh, darling, when you move in certain circles, you know people. I just introduced Ashton to a broker. The rest was his brilliance." "A broker," I mused. "That's very fortunate. Usually, venture capital takes months of due diligence, audits, background checks. It's rare to see money move that fast. Unless, I let the word hang there. Unless what? Kendrick asked. He had stopped eating. He was staring at me. Unless the investor already knew the family, I said innocently, or unless they didn't care about the risk. They believe in the product, Ashton said defensively. The app is solid, Aunt Zara. I'm sure it is, honey, I said, reaching over to pat his hand. I'm just saying, in my line of work, when money appears too easily, it usually comes with strings attached, or hidden costs. You're being cynical, Zara, Nadine snapped. Not everything is a transaction. Sometimes people just want to help. Help, I repeated. That's a nice word. Like how you help Kendrick with his networking? Kendrick choked on his water, a loud, wet coughing fit. You okay, babe? I asked, rubbing his back. Wrong pipe? Fine, he wheezed, face red. Just spicy. The water is spicy? I asked. The tartare, he gasped. Right, I said. I looked back at Nadine. I was just telling Kendrick the other day how impressed I am by you, Nadine, maintaining this lifestyle. The clothes, the house, the gifts. As a single woman in this economy, it's a feat. Most widows would be downsizing. But you're expanding. It's inspiring. Really. Nadine went still. The compliment was a Trojan horse. I was calling out her finances. I knew she was broke. I knew she was burning through cash she didn't have. I have made wise investments over the years, she said icily. Investments, I nodded. Like Vantage Capital? I don't invest in Vantage, she said quickly. I just made an introduction. Of course, I smiled. My mistake. I just assume smart women like us always have a stake in the game. We don't do anything for free, do we? The main course arrived. Sea bass for me, steak for Kendrick, lobster risotto for Nadine. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a steak knife. Kendrick was sweating. He kept glancing between me and Nadine, trying to read the subtext. So, Zara, Nadine said, trying to regain control. How is your little firm doing? Kendrick says you're working late a lot. Trouble in paradise? My little firm is doing great, I said, emphasizing the diminutive she loved to use. Actually, we're doing a massive internal audit right now, cleaning house. Kendrick froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Audit? Just routine, I said, taking a sip of wine. We found some irregularities in one of the subsidiaries. You know how it is. Sometimes employees get greedy. They think nobody is watching the small expenses, shipping, logistics, consulting fees. I watched Kendrick's face drain of color. He looked like he was about to vomit his $50 steak. That sounds tedious, Nadine said, bored. It's actually fascinating, I said. It's like a puzzle. You follow the money and it tells you a story about who is sleeping with who is lying to who. Zara, Kendrick barked. It was too loud. Several other tables turned to look. What? I looked at him, wide-eyed. I'm talking about corporate fraud cases, Kendrick. Why are you so jumpy? You're boring us with shop talk, he muttered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Let's talk about the wedding. Yes, the wedding, Nadine said, seizing the lifeline. I was thinking we should have a raw bar, oysters. Speaking of fraud, I interrupted, ignoring her. I read this article the other day about a woman who embezzled millions from her husband's company to fund her lover's son's business. Can you imagine? I looked directly at Nadine. Can you imagine the audacity? I asked. To steal from the family you're marrying into? To smile at the wife while picking her pocket? Nadine was staring at me. Her mouth was slightly open. The forkful of lobster risotto hovered in the air. That's a very specific example, she whispered. Isn't it? I smiled. But people are predictable. They always think they're smarter than the person they're robbing. They mistake kindness for blindness. I leaned in closer. But here's the kicker, I said, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. The wife knew. She knew the whole time. She just let them dig the hole deeper because she wanted to see how much dirt they would shovel on themselves before she buried them. Nadine swallowed, hard, and then she choked. It wasn't a polite cough. It was a full-blown aspiration. A piece of lobster went down the wrong way. She gagged, clutching her throat. Her face turned purple. "Mom?" Ashton jumped up. "Mom! Water!" Kendrick shouted, knocking over his own glass. Nadine hacked, wheezed, and finally managed to cough up the obstruction into her napkin. She sat there, eyes watering, gasping for air, ruining her perfect makeup. "Are you okay?" I asked. I didn't stand up. I didn't offer help. I just sat there, sipping my wine. "I'm fine," she rasped, wiping tears from her eyes. She looked at me with pure terror now. She knew. She didn't know how much I knew, but she knew the game was up. "Good," I said. "Eat slowly, Nadine. You don't want to choke on your own greed." The drive home was silent for the first 10 minutes. Kendrick drove. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. I looked out the window, humming a little tune. "What was that?" he finally exploded. "What the hell was that, Zara?" "What was what?" I asked calmly. "Dinner. You were weird. You were aggressive. Fraudulent partners? Internal audit? You were practically attacking Nadine." "I was making conversation," I said. "Why are you so defensive? Do you have something to worry about with the audit, Kendrick?" "No," he yelled. "Of course not. But you made everyone uncomfortable. You made Nadine choke." "She choked because she eats too fast," I said. "And why do you care so much about Nadine's comfort? You seem very concerned about her, knocking over your water glass like a knight in shining armor." "She's Noelle's future mother-in-law. She's family." "Is she?" I turned to look at him. The streetlights flickered over his face, illuminating the sweat on his forehead. "You acted like you were terrified I was going to say something specific. What are you hiding, Ken?" "Nothing." He hit the steering wheel. "I'm just stressed about the deal, the Singapore deal. And you're acting like a psycho." "I'm acting like a CEO," I corrected. "And frankly, your reaction is concerning. Maybe I should take a closer look at your subsidiary. If you're this stressed, maybe you need help. Maybe I should send an external audit team in next week." "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. "No, that's not necessary. I have it under control. I'm just tired, Z. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap." He was backpedaling. He was terrified. He realized he had shown too much emotion. "Okay," I said, softening my voice. "I'm sorry, too. Maybe I was a little intense. I've just been reading too many crime novels." He let out a breath he had been holding. Yeah, that's it. You need a break, babe. After the wedding, let's take a vacation. Just us." "That sounds lovely," I lied. I watched him relax. He thought he had talked his way out of it. He thought I was just stressed Zara. He didn't see the knife I was holding behind my back. Friday morning, the day before the engagement party. Kendrick left early, claiming he had to prep the office for the weekend. I knew he was going to meet Nadine. They needed to coordinate their stories. They were probably meeting in that hotel room to panic. Good. Let them panic. Panic makes people sloppy. I went into my soundproof office. On my desk was a stack of papers, the evidence from Harlan. I needed to build the weapon. I took a large, brown, legal envelope. It was plain, unmarked. I laid out the documents. I needed this to be simple. Ashton was a tech guy. He thought in code, in logic flows. If I gave him emotional garbage, photos of them kissing, he might reject it. He might think it was photoshopped. He might defend his mother. But numbers? Numbers don't lie. Code doesn't lie. Step 1. The input. I placed the copy of the wire transfer from Adabio Consulting to the Shell Corp. 3.2 million signed by Kendrick. Step 2. The process. I placed the bank ledger from Vantage Capital, Singapore. It showed an incoming wire of $3.15 million minus fees from the Shell Corp. Step 3. The output. I placed the investment agreement between Vantage Capital and Ascend Tech, Ashton's company. $3.15 million. I took a red pen. I circled the transaction ID on the first document. I circled the matching transaction ID on the second. I circled the matching date on the third. I drew a line connecting them. Kendrick, Shell, Vantage, Ashton. It was a perfect loop, a closed circuit of theft. I added one more document, a screenshot of the email from Nadine. The boy needs another $500K. Make it happen. I clipped them together. I didn't write a note. I didn't write sorry or look at this. The data spoke for itself. I slid the stack into the envelope. I sealed it. I weighed it in my hands. It was light, but it contained enough explosive force to level a building. I picked up my burner phone. Harlan? Yeah, Z? The package is ready. I need a courier, a bike messenger, someone who looks like a hipster, not a Fed. I need it delivered to Ashton's co-working space in Georgetown, level 4, WeWork offices. Time? Now. He has a team meeting at 11 Asawari. I want him to get it right before he walks in. Consider it done. I hung up. I looked at the envelope one last time. Happy engagement, Ashton, I whispered. Welcome to the family. I sat in my car, parked 2 blocks away from the WeWork building in Georgetown, where Ashton's company, Ascend Tech, rented the 4th floor. I wasn't there to intervene. I was there to watch the green dot on my phone screen. I had hired a courier service that specialized in high-value, secure legal documents. It cost me $200 for a 10-minute job, but I needed the signature chain. The green dot, the courier, turned the corner onto M Street. I checked my watch. 10:48 a.m. Ashton's weekly all-hands meeting was at 11 a.m. He would be at his desk, probably reviewing his slide deck, probably drinking a yerba mate, feeling like the king of the world. The green dot stopped at the building entrance. My phone buzzed. Delivery attempt initiated. I held my breath. This was the point of no return. Once that envelope touched his hands, the chain reaction began. There was no unringing this bell. I imagined the courier walking into the lobby. I imagined him bypassing the receptionist because the package was marked personal and confidential, hand deliver only. I imagined him taking the elevator up. 10:52 a.m. The dot was still stationary. Come on, I whispered. Don't get stopped by security. Then the notification changed. Status. Delivered. Signed by A. De Winter. I let out a breath that rattled in my chest. He had it. I pictured him sitting at his desk, that cheap IKEA standing desk he was so proud of. I pictured him slicing open the plain brown envelope. I pictured him pulling out the flowchart. The logic bomb had detonated. I put the car in gear. I didn't need to see the smoke. I just needed to be ready for the fallout. I drove back to my office, but I couldn't focus on work. I had my burner phone propped up against my monitor, waiting for Harlan. Harlan had access to the building's security feed. Don't ask me how, I didn't want to know. He was my eyes. At 11:15 a.m., the first text came through. Harlan. Target opened the package. I stared at the screen. The seconds ticked by like hours. Harlan. He's reading. He stopped moving. He's been staring at page 2 for 4 minutes. Page 2 was the wire transfer copy with Kendrick's signature. The smoking gun. Harlan. He's standing up. He looks unstable. He just knocked his coffee over. He didn't even try to clean it up. I closed my eyes. I could see it. The brown liquid dripping onto the cheap carpet. The realization washing over him like cold water. The boy who thought he was a genius entrepreneur realizing he was just a laundromat for stolen cash. Harlan. He's walking out of the office. He's leaving his laptop. He's leaving his phone on the desk. Wait. He's coming back for the phone. He looks like he's going to be sick. Harlan. He's bypassing the conference room. His team is waiting for him. He just walked right past the glass door. He's heading for the elevators. He's holding the envelope against his chest like a shield. Harlan. Target has left the building. He's getting into a cab. He looks like a ghost, Z. You really gutted him. I put the phone down. I felt a pang of something. Guilt? Pity? Ashton was collateral damage. He was innocent, technically. But innocence is a luxury you can't afford when you're swimming with sharks. He was going to confront his mother, or he was going to run. Either way, the all-hands meeting was canceled. And the wedding? The wedding was now walking on a tightrope over a canyon. I'm sorry, Ashton, I whispered to the empty office, but you needed to know. By 4:00 p.m., the shockwave reached Noelle. My phone rang. It was her personalized ringtone. Girls just want to have fun, which felt incredibly ironic right now. Hey, Noelle, I answered, keeping my voice light and breezy. Everything's set for the big day tomorrow. Zara. She sounded breathless, on the verge of tears. Again. Have you heard from Kendrick? Or anyone? No, I'm at the office. Why? What's wrong? It's Ashton. He's gone dark. What do you mean, dark? I swiveled my chair around, looking out at the city skyline. I mean, he hasn't replied to my texts since 11 noon this morning. We were supposed to meet for a final walkthrough at the hotel at 2 Anafraghoy. He never showed up. He didn't call. I called his office, and his assistant said he left abruptly before his team meeting and looked unwell. Unwell? I echoed. Maybe he ate something bad? Food poisoning? I don't know. I went to his apartment. He wasn't there. I called Nadine, and she sounded weird too. She said she hadn't seen him, but that he was probably just working out pre-wedding jitters. But Zara? He turned off his location sharing. Okay, that is weird, I admitted, playing the role of the concerned sister-in-law. But listen, Noelle. Men process stress differently. He's about to get married. He's launching a company. He's got his mother breathing down his neck. Maybe he just needed a few hours to breathe, to drive, to clear his head. Do you think he's getting cold feet? Noelle sobbed. Do you think he's going to leave me at the altar? No, I said firmly. He loves you. I saw the way he looked at you at dinner. He's not leaving you. He's probably just dealing with a crisis at work. Tech startups are volatile, right? Yeah. Maybe the app crashed or something. She sniffled, clinging to the lifeline I threw her. Exactly. Look, don't bombard him. Give him space until tonight. If he doesn't surface by tomorrow morning, then we worry. For now, focus on your skin. Stress causes breakouts. You're right. You're always right. God, I'm a mess. You're a bride, I corrected. It's in the job description. Go take a bath. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up. He wasn't getting cold feet. He was getting a cold reality check. He was probably sitting in a park somewhere, looking at that flow chart, realizing that his fiancé's brother was the criminal financier of his life. He wouldn't call Noelle. He couldn't. What would he say? Hey, honey, your brother is embezzling millions to help my mom launder money through my company. No, he would stay silent. He would show up tomorrow because he had to, but he would be a different man when he walked into that ballroom. Zuos. Saturday. The day. The house was awake before the sun. By 6 a.m., the doorbell was ringing. It was the Glam Squad, a team of 3 women dragging suitcases full of hairspray and contour palettes that Noelle had hired for the entire bridal party. I came downstairs in my silk robe holding a cup of tea. Good morning, shouted the lead makeup artist, a woman named Trixie with bright pink hair. Who's ready to get gorgeous? Too loud, I murmured, forcing a smile. Coffee is in the kitchen. Set up in the sunroom. Kendrick was already up. He was pacing in the living room, talking on his phone in a hushed, angry whisper. I don't know where he is, Nadine. No, I haven't called him. Well, if he shows up, he shows up. Just stick to the script. He saw me and immediately hung up. Hey, babe, he said, his smile looking brittle, like cracked glaze. Big day. Who was that? I asked, walking past him to check the weather on the thermostat. Just the caterer, double-checking the count. The caterer is named Nadine? I asked without looking at him. He froze. What? No, I said Dean. The caterer is Dean. Ah, Dean. I turned and looked at him. You look tense, Ken. Your shoulders are up to your ears. Just want it to be perfect for Noelle, he said, cracking his knuckles. Have you seen her? She's upstairs hyperventilating, the usual. Go shower. You smell like stress sweat. I went into the sunroom. Trixie sat me down in the high chair. You have amazing skin, she said, touching my face. But wow, your jaw is tight. Are you grinding your teeth? Something like that, I said, closing my eyes. She started applying the primer, cold, smooth silicone. It felt like putting on a mask, a layer of protection. We're going for ethereal glow, right? Trixie asked. No, I said, opening my eyes to look at myself in the lighted mirror. Go for Ice Queen. Sharp liner, dark lip. I want to look formidable. Trixie paused, then grinned. Ooh, drama. I like it. As she painted my face, I went over the checklist in my head. Asset transfer. Confirmed. Projector hack. Ready. Divorce papers. In my purse. Suitcase packed in the trunk of my car. I wasn't just attending a party. I was attending my own liberation. By 4 p.m., we were dressed. I walked into the master bedroom. Kendrick was standing in front of the full-length mirror, struggling with his cufflinks. He was wearing his tuxedo. He looked handsome. Objectively, he was a beautiful man. That was how he got away with everything. Here, I said, walking over. Let me. He lowered his hands. I deftly fastened the silver links. My fingers brushed his wrist. His pulse was racing. Thump, thump, thump. Thanks, Z, he sighed. I can never get these damn things. I have something for you, I said. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a small velvet box. Kendrick's eyes widened. He looked genuinely touched, and then, immediately, guilty. The guilt flashed across his face like a shadow. Babe, you didn't have to. Open it. He opened the box. Inside sat a vintage Omega Seamaster. It wasn't new. It was from the year we got married. I had found it at an auction months ago, back when I still thought we were a team. Zara, he whispered. This is the one I wanted. From our honeymoon. I know, I said softly. I wanted you to have it. Time is precious, Kendrick. You never know how much you have left. He took the watch out. His hands were shaking slightly. He took off his Rolex, the one he wore to meet Nadine, and put on the Omega. I love you, he said. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the man I married, the man before the greed, the man before Nadine. I know I've been distant, stressed, but after tonight, I promise, things are going to change. I'm going to be better. I know things are going to change, I said, adjusting his bow tie. I pulled it tight. Not choking tight, but tight enough to be felt. You look perfect. You too, he said. That dress. Wow. I was wearing the champagne gold gown. It fit like liquid metal. It was armor. Shall we go? I asked. The limo is waiting. Yeah, he took a deep breath. Let's go get Noelle married. He offered me his arm. I took it. I was walking arm in arm with a man who had stolen $3 million from me, and I had just given him a watch so he could count down the minutes to his own destruction. The Grand Hotel ballroom was a sensory assault. The air smelled of expensive lilies, roasted beef, and that specific ozone scent of indoor pyrotechnics. The lighting was dim, purple, and gold. Nadine's colors. A string quartet was playing a pop cover of a Taylor Swift song in the corner. We walked in, the golden couple of the bride's family. Heads turned. People waved. I smiled. My Ice Queen makeup held up. I felt nothing. No nerves, just a cold, hard anticipation. There she is, Kendrick muttered. Nadine was holding court near the ice sculpture. She was wearing a silver dress that looked like it was made of chainmail. She looked frantic. Her eyes were darting around the room, scanning the entrances. She spotted us and rushed over. "Kendrick! Zara!" She kissed us both too fast. She smelled like gin again. "Have you seen him? Have you seen Ashton?" "He's not here?" Kendrick asked, his voice rising. "No, the ceremony starts in 20 minutes. He's not answering his phone. His groomsmen say he texted them, 'I'll be there,' but that was 4 hours ago." "He'll be here," I said calmly. "Traffic is terrible." "Traffic doesn't take 4 hours, Zara," Nadine snapped, her mask slipping. She looked old suddenly. The lines around her mouth were deep crevices of panic. "If he doesn't show up, the humiliation, The guests?" "It's not about the guests, Nadine," I said. "It's about the couple. Relax, have a drink." I signaled a waiter and plucked a glass of champagne from his tray. I handed it to Nadine. "Drink," I ordered. She took it and downed half the glass in one gulp. "Look!" someone shouted. We turned toward the main entrance. The double doors swung open. Ashton stood there. He was wearing his tux, but his tie was crooked. His hair was uncombed. He looked pale, gaunt, like he had just walked out of a hospital ward. "Ashton!" Nadine cried out, relief washing over her face. She ran toward him. "Oh, thank God, you had me worried sick." She reached out to hug him. Ashton didn't hug her back. He stood rigid, his arms at his sides. He looked over her shoulder. He looked directly at Kendrick. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. Kendrick flinched, physically stepping back behind me. "He's here," Kendrick whispered. "Why is he looking at me like that?" "Maybe he's just nervous," I said, taking a sip of my own champagne. The bubbles danced on my tongue. Ashton walked past his mother without a word. He walked into the room. He didn't go to the groomsmen. He went straight to the bar and ordered a double whiskey. Showtime, I thought. I looked at the stage. The massive projection screen was lowered, displaying a looped slideshow of Noelle and Ashton's engagement photos. I caught the eye of the AV technician in the booth, a guy named Dave, who I had tipped $500 earlier that afternoon to prioritize my USB drive. Dave gave me a subtle thumbs up. The trap was set. The players were in position. "Let's find our seats," I said to Kendrick. "We have the best view in the house." The dinner service was a synchronized ballet of waiters dropping plates of filet mignon in front of 200 guests. The clinking of silverware against fine china created a low, polite roar. I sat at the head table, flanked by an empty chair where Ashton should have been. He was still at the bar, nursing his third whiskey, and Kendrick, who was vibrating with nervous energy. "He's drunk," Kendrick hissed in my ear, nodding toward the bar. "Look at him. He's going to embarrass us." "He's celebrating," I said, slicing into my steak. It was rare. Bloody. Let the boy drink. Nadine tapped her spoon against her champagne flute. Ting, ting, ting. The room quieted. A spotlight swung over to the podium. "Family and friends," Nadine began. Her voice was steady, practiced. She held the microphone like a scepter. "Tonight is about legacy. It's about two dynasties merging." She went on for 10 minutes. She talked about the De Winter history. She talked about her beloved late husband. She barely mentioned Noelle. She mentioned Ashton's brilliant business acumen 3 times. I watched Noelle. She looked small in her silver dress, picking at a bread roll. She kept glancing at Ashton's empty chair. "And now," Nadine said, flashing a blinding smile, "I'd like to invite the man of the house, my future co-patriarch, Kendrick Adabio, to say a few words." Kendrick shot up like he'd been electrocuted. He buttoned his jacket, checked his new Omega watch, and strode to the podium. He oozed charisma. The guests applauded. They loved him. "Thank you, Nadine," Kendrick said, his voice deep and smooth. "You know, when I look at Ashton and Noelle, I see trust. I took a sip of water to keep from laughing. Trust is the currency of love, Kendrick continued, leaning into the mic. Without trust, you're bankrupt. In business, we talk about ROI. But in marriage, the return on investment is infinite. I've learned that from my beautiful wife, Zara. He pointed at me. The spotlight hit me. I smiled. My ice queen smile. I raised my glass. Zara has been my rock, Kendrick lied. She supports my dreams. She manages our world. And that's what I wish for you, Ashton. A partner who knows your worth. He looked toward the bar. Ashton had turned around on his stool. He was holding a glass of amber liquid. He stared at Kendrick with dead, shark-like eyes. He didn't clap. So, Kendrick faltered slightly, sensing the coldness from the groom. Let's raise a glass. To trust. To transparency. To family. To family! The guests shouted. Kendrick walked back to the table, wiping sweat from his brow. He sat down heavily. Nailed it, he whispered to me. You really did, I said. Trust. Transparency. I'm inspired, Ken. Really. The waiters cleared the plates. The lights dimmed further, turning the ballroom into a cavern of purple shadows. The master of ceremonies, a guy with a radio voice named Brett, took the stage. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special treat. A surprise video dedication prepared by the sister-in-law of the bride, Mrs. Zara Adabio. Let's watch. Applause. Polite cheering. Nadine leaned across the table. That's sweet of you, Zara. I hope you use the high-resolution photos I sent you, the ones from the Hamptons. Oh, I used the highest resolution I could find, I assured her. I turned my chair slightly to face the massive 30-foot screen behind the stage. The music started. 1,000 Years by Christina Perri. Classic. Saccharine. The first photo popped up. Baby Noel in a bathtub. Oh, the crowd cooed. Next photo. Ashton playing Little League baseball. Cute. Next, Noel and Ashton at prom. Cheering. I glanced at the tech booth in the back of the room. Dave, the tech guy, was wearing a headset. He caught my eye. I nodded. Just a microscopic tilt of the chin. Dave nodded back. On screen, a photo of Noel and Ashton holding hands on a beach appeared. The music swelled to the chorus. I have died every day waiting for you. Then the audio cut out. Skirt. A harsh static noise ripped through the speakers. The screen flickered, green lines, white noise. Oh dear, Nadine murmured. Technical difficulties. How amateur. Just wait, I whispered. The screen went black for 2 seconds. The room was silent. Then the video feed changed. It wasn't a photo, it was a video. 4K, 60 frames per second. Low light but crystal clear. The VIP lounge at Tyson's Galleria. The camera angle was from behind a pillar, but the zoom was steady. A man in a navy suit, a woman with a stiff blonde updo. Is that? Someone at the next table whispered. On the massive screen, 50 times larger than life, Kendrick Adabio leaned down and buried his face in Dr. Nadine de Winter's neck. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. 200 people stopped breathing at the same time. Then the audio from the video kicked in. It echoed off the high ceilings. You're a genius, Nadine, Kendrick's voice boomed. It was unmistakable. It was the same voice that had just given a speech about trust. I know, darling. Nadine's recorded voice purred. But keep your voice down. We have to be careful until the wire transfer clears. In the real world, Nadine dropped her champagne flute. It hit the table, shattering. Shards of glass flew into the centerpiece. Champagne soaked the white tablecloth. What is this? She hissed. Turn it off! Turn it off! The video continued. Kendrick's hand slid down Nadine's blazer. The kiss. It was grotesque on the big screen. The wet sound of their lips parting was amplified by the stadium-quality speakers. And Zara? Recorded Kendrick asked. Zara is a worker bee. Recorded. Nadine laughed. She treats you like an employee. I treat you like a king." I looked at Kendrick. He was frozen. He wasn't breathing. His face had gone the color of old ash. He was staring at the screen, watching himself betray me. "Worker B," I said clearly into the silence of our table. Kendrick turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were wide, terrified animal eyes. "Zara," he croaked. "No." The video looped. It showed the next clip, the one I took 5 minutes later. "Ashton suspects nothing. The boy is too busy coding his little app to look at the ledgers." At the bar, Ashton slammed his whiskey glass down. It didn't break, but the sound was like a gunshot. The guests started to gasp. A low murmur built into a roar. Phones were coming out. People were recording the screen. "This is AI," Nadine screamed, standing up and knocking her chair over. She waved her arms at the crowd. "This is a deep fake. It's fake. Someone hacked the system." She pointed a shaking finger at the projection booth. "Cut the feed. Turn it off." Dave, my loyal tech guy, pretended to frantically push buttons, but the video kept playing. He was earning his bonus tonight. "It's not AI, Nadine," I said, not shouting, but my voice cut through the noise near us. "AI doesn't get the mole on Kendrick's neck right." Noelle stood up. She looked at the screen, then at Kendrick, then at Nadine. "Ken?" she whispered. Her voice broke. "Ken, is that you?" Kendrick tried to stand, but his legs hit the table leg. He stumbled. "Noelle, listen. It's complicated. It's edited. Zara is crazy. She's jealous." "Jealous?" Noelle screamed. "You're kissing his mother. You're kissing Nadine." She looked at Nadine, the woman she had been terrified of, the woman she had tried so hard to please. "You slept with my brother?" Noelle shrieked. It was a primal, gut-wrenching sound. "No, no," Nadine yelled, her face contorted. "He seduced me. He's a predator. I was vulnerable." "You literally called yourself a genius on tape," I interjected helpfully. The crowd was in chaos. People were standing on chairs to get a better view. The string quartet looked terrified, clutching their violins. Kendrick lunged toward me. His face was twisted in fury. "You bitch!" he screamed. "You ruined everything! You ruined my life!" He reached for my arm, but before he could touch me, a large hand grabbed his shoulder. It was one of the groomsmen, a linebacker-sized guy named Marcus. "Don't touch her, man," Marcus growled. Kendrick was panting, wild-eyed. "She planned this. She recorded us. That's illegal." "So is embezzlement," a voice said from the stage. The room turned. Ashton was standing at the podium. He had walked up the stairs while everyone was watching the screen. He held the microphone in one hand and a crumpled sheaf of papers in the other. He swayed slightly, but his grip on the mic was iron hard. "Turn off the video," Ashton commanded. Dave in the booth finally cut the feed. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. "My mother," Ashton said, his voice echoing through the ballroom, "says it's a deep fake. She says it's AI." He held up the papers. "This isn't AI," he said. "These are bank records." "Ashton, stop!" Nadine shrieked from the floor. She tried to run toward the stage, but her high heel caught on her dress and she fell to her knees. "Don't you dare! I gave you everything!" "You gave me stolen money!" Ashton roared. The sound distorted in the speakers. He looked at the papers, reading them aloud. "Wire transfer. Adabio Consulting to Vantage Capital. $3.2 million. Signed by Kendrick Adabio." He looked at Kendrick. "You stole from your wife," Ashton said. "You funneled it through a shell company in Singapore, and you gave it to me. You made me an accomplice." The guests gasped. This wasn't just a sex scandal anymore. This was a crime scene. "I built my company on this," Ashton said, tears streaming down his face. "I hired people. I made promises. And it's all fake. It's all dirty." He looked at Noelle. She was sobbing in the arms of her bridesmaids. "Noelle," Ashton said softly into the mic, "I can't marry you. I can't bring this this filth into your life. Your brother and my mother, they're rot. And I'm part of the rot." "Ashton, no," Noelle wept. "I'm sorry," Ashton said. He took the engagement ring box out of his pocket. He must have had the wedding bands in there. He looked at it. He threw it at Nadine. It hit her shoulder and skittered across the dance floor. "You wanted a dynasty, Mom?" Ashton said. "Here, have the ashes." He dropped the microphone. Thud. He walked down the stage stairs, past his mother who was sobbing on the floor, past Kendrick who was being held back by 2 groomsmen, and headed for the exit. He didn't look back. The party was over. The autopsy had begun. Guests were rushing for the exits, phones pressed to their ears, eager to be the first to spread the gossip. Nadine was on the floor, surrounded by a few friends who looked more curious than concerned. She was sobbing about her reputation. Kendrick was sitting in a chair, head in his hands, defeated. I stood up. I smoothed the skirt of my champagne gown. I picked up my clutch. I walked over to Kendrick. I stood in front of him until he looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with shock. "Zara," he whispered. "Please, we can fix this. I can explain." I leaned down. "You have 24 hours to move out," I said quietly. "The locks change on Sunday." "But the money," he stammered. Nadine said. "Nadine is broke," I said. "And so are you." "I moved the assets, Kendrick. The joint accounts are empty. The stock portfolio is liquidated. You have the clothes on your back and that watch I gave you." He looked at the omega on his wrist, the gift, the timer. "You planned this," he breathed. "The dinner, the watch, everything?" "I'm a logistics expert, Kendrick," I smiled. "I planned a successful exit strategy." I turned and walked away. I walked past Nadine. She reached out a hand to grab my ankle. "You demon," she hissed. "You demon in silk." I stepped over her hand like she was a puddle. "Goodbye, Nadine. Good luck with the audit." I walked out of the ballroom. I walked through the lobby. I handed my ticket to the valet. The night air was cool. I took a deep breath. It tasted like rain and freedom. My car arrived. I tipped the valet $100. "Have a good night, ma'am," he said. "Oh," I said, getting into the driver's seat. "I already have." I didn't go to a hotel. I went home. It was my house. I changed into sweatpants and poured a glass of cheap wine. I sat in the living room in the dark, waiting. At 3 a.m., the front door rattled. Then it opened. Kendrick walked in. He looked like he had been in a fight. His tuxedo was torn at the shoulder. His tie was gone. He reeked of alcohol. He saw me sitting there. "You locked the bedroom door," he said. His voice was dull, lifeless. "I did," I said. He slumped onto the sofa opposite me. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" "The guest room is full of boxes," I said. "Your boxes. I packed them while you were at the pre-wedding drinks yesterday." He laughed, a bitter barking sound. "You really didn't leave anything to chance." He looked around the living room. "I built this life with you, Zara." "No," I corrected. "I built this life. You just decorated it with lies." I slid a manila envelope across the coffee table. "What is this?" he asked. "More bank statements?" "Divorce papers," I said, "and a non-disclosure agreement." "NDA?" He frowned. "Sign the divorce papers uncontested. Waive your right to spousal support. Give me full ownership of the house. In exchange, I won't hand the embezzlement file to the FBI." He stared at me. "You'd send me to jail?" "In a heartbeat," I said. "The file is with my lawyer. If you fight me on the divorce, if you try to take 1 dime of my money, the file goes to the district attorney." He looked at the papers. He looked at me. He saw the end. "I have nothing," he whispered. "You have your freedom," I said, "which is more than you deserve." He picked up a pen from the table. His hand shook, but he signed. "Get out," I said. "Tonight?" "Right now." He stood up. He grabbed the handle of the suitcase I had left by the door. He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Did you ever love me?" he asked. "I love the man I thought you were," I said, "but he never existed." He walked out. The door clicked shut. I locked the deadbolt. Update. It's been 90 days since the Red Wedding, as the DC blogs are calling it. I'm currently sitting on the deck of a rental house in Martha's Vineyard. The ocean is gray and churning, which matches my mood perfectly, wild and unbothered. Life has been efficient. The divorce was finalized in record time. Kendrick didn't have the funds to hire a lawyer to fight the NDA. He signed everything. My company took a hit initially. The scandal of the embezzling husband made the news, but I spun it. I branded myself as the Iron CEO who cleans house, even her own. Clients loved it. Revenue is up 15%. Noelle is doing okay. She moved to Chicago to get away from the memories. We talk once a week. She's in therapy, undoing the damage Nadine did to her self-esteem. She returned the Birkin to the store and used the credit to furnish her new apartment. Ashton did the honorable thing. He dissolved his company, returned what little capital was left to my firm — it was pennies, but the gesture mattered — and joined the Peace Corps. He's in Belize building irrigation systems. He sent me a postcard last week. It just said, "Thank you for the truth." And the dynamic duo. I picked up my iPad and opened the link Noelle had sent me this morning. It was a local news article from a small town in Florida. Headline: Dispute over expired coupons leads to arrest at grocery store. The photo was grainy, police body cam footage, but there they were. Nadine looked unrecognizable. Her roots had grown out, gray and harsh against the blonde dye. She was wearing a tracksuit. She was screaming at a teenage cashier, and behind her, trying to pull her away, was Kendrick. He looked bloated. He was wearing a polo shirt that was too tight. He looked tired. According to the article, they were living in a motel. Nadine had lost everything to creditors. Kendrick couldn't get a job in finance with the rumors swirling, so he was driving for a rideshare app. They were stuck together. Two parasites with no host left to feed on, slowly eating each other alive. I zoomed in on Kendrick's wrist in the photo. He was still wearing the Omega. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and closed the tab. Karma didn't need my help anymore. It was doing just fine on its own. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.